Assembly for Wales is now in session, and I would like to welcome a new member this afternoon, Altaf Hussain, who is the new Conservative member of the South Wales West region. We are very pleased to have you here and look forward to your contributions both here in the Chamber and beyond. And I'd like to invite you to say a few words if you choose to.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for this generous welcome. I'm overwhelmed and honored to be among you all. I would also like to thank the voters of South Wales West and to assure them that I will always put their interest first in everything I do as an Assembly member. May I pay tribute to Byron Davies, now Member of Parliament for Gower. I have worked with him for many years, and I'll seek to continue his great work in the months to come. I very much look forward to working with our Welsh Conservative team, and in particular the great leadership of Andrew Archie Davis. Yeah. I hope that with my background as a consultant orthopedic surgeon, I will campaign for a Welsh NHS that is there for us all, wherever, whenever we need it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
We now move to the agenda, and the first item this afternoon are questions to the First Minister. And question one is Bethan Jenkins.
Will the First Minister provide an update on the M4 Junction 41 trial closure?
Yes, an announcement about the outcome of the trial will be made later this month.
Thank you for your answer. I mean, next week we're on recess, and it would be very helpful if we could have a reply this week while we are scrutinising you as First Minister here in the National Assembly, because what we wouldn't want to have is an announcement where we cannot scrutinise you as a government on this trial closure, because campaigners have been asking the Welsh Government for information on the alternatives that were looked into, such as hard shoulder running, and we haven't been able to access the research, the funding, the information on that. As an open and accountable government that you pride yourselves in, can you please give us that information?
Of course. As I said, the outcome of the trial will be known this month. The decision will be a separate announcement. So there's no question of an announcement being made with regard to the decision, with members not having the opportunity to scrutinise that announcement.
David Rees.
First Minister, as you know, I've been raising this issue ever since the decision, or the decision to actually introduce the trial was made last year. Now, in relation to that, and since the trial has started, I actually had information that ambulances have actually been in a situation where they had blue lights flashing and they have approached the junction when it's been closed and have had to reverse and then find the alternative route, therefore taking more time. What discussions has the Welsh Government had with the emergency services since the trial has actually commenced to see the implications upon emergency services and what they do? Because I've had personal experience of the situation where an ambulance needed to be there critically, and this junction, with the problems of the traffic on the roads around it, could have actually delayed that situation.
I know that officials held meetings prior to the trial with the police to seek their views on the trial closure. The ambulance and fire services attended one of the meetings as non-statutory consultees. And I can say, of course, that the emergency services will have the opportunity to express any issues or comments on any proposals for permanent closure, should that be the decision, and that's completely without prejudice, may I add, as part of any associated public consultation process. So, without prejudice to what any decision might be, there will, of course, be an opportunity for the emergency services to make their views known.
Susie Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. You know, of course, that local residents are very concerned about the decisions on Junction 41. Now they see permanent electricity supplies being laid close to the closure signs without a single word of explanation as to why that's being done, even a word without prejudice. Could you treat my constituents with a little respect and publish the outcomes of the trial closure at once?
We have been completely clear there will be a statement on the outcome of the trial itself, and then there will be a project as regards what decision has been taken in considering that evidence, and that is completely clear.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the distinction you've just made between the outcome of the trial and the decision process is a new factor, I think, in terms of answers we've had questions in this chamber on this particular issue. Given that you've now said that the outcome of the trial will be published before the end of May, can you now give us a timetable for when the decision will be made? What process will be undertaken prior to that decision being made, and what consultation on that decision will be taken before we actually come to that final conclusion?
Well, first of all, it's important that members are aware of what the outcome of the trial is. Then, of course, it would be for the Minister to consider the evidence produced as a result of that trial. I can say, of course, that if there is a decision, and it is an if at this stage, to move ahead with a permanent closure, should that be the decision, then there will, of course, be a public consultation process if that is the case.
Question 2, Christine Chapman.
Thank you. What is the Welsh Government doing to tackle obesity levels in Wales?
Well, we have a commitment, of course, to tackle obesity in Wales. We've introduced legislative policy and delivery initiatives that will bring about the kind of approach that we would want to see to dealing with this hugely important issue. Ultimately, of course, people must be encouraged and supported to change their lifestyles. And that, of course, is the way to tackle an issue that is an issue in much of the developed world.
Thank you, First Minister. Well, I look forward to the updates as well from Welsh LHBs on how they're delivering against the obesity pathway, and hope to see clear progress on last year. We know that tackling obesity is not just about treating the symptoms, but also the causes. And it's 8 years since the Foresight report termed modern Britain an obesogenic environment. I know the Children and Young People Committee touched on this in their recent inquiry, but how is the Welsh Government making sure that holistic cultural changes that are needed to tackle what is rightly termed an epidemic are integrated across all areas of government?
By taking a coordinated approach, I can give the member 4 examples of where that is happening. Firstly, creating the right environment to ensure that healthier choices are easier and that individuals are supported appropriately. And of course, we've set improved health as one of a series of 7 national wellbeing goals in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And we have or are planning to introduce targeted legislation such as the Active Travel Act and the Public Health Bill. We're also sponsoring campaigns aimed at supporting behaviour change, such as Change for Life, making sure that all children have access to healthy nutritional food at schools, and of course working with our partners to develop an all-Wales physical activity plan.
John Miller.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, there are many reasons that people have unhealthy relationships with food, and some of those reasons is because of mental health problems. There are young people in my own constituency that are currently waiting 20 weeks and longer for clinical assessments from the CAM service in the Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board. What action is your government taking to reduce those waiting times so that people can have access to the treatment and support that they need?
Extra resources are being targeted towards mental health. We know that this is an important issue, and we know that it is an issue that will affect many people to different degrees at different times in their lives. And that is why, of course, the Health Minister is looking at increasing the resources available for those who are in need of mental health services, and CAMS, of course, is an important part of that.
Ellen Jones.
Prif Weinidog.
First Minister, a number of obesity experts say that we need to reduce the amount of sugar in the population's diet. Now, Plaid Cymru believes that the next Welsh Government should look at the introduction and a tax on sugary drinks. Now, your support for such a pop tax has been cool to date. Given the fact that obesity among our young people is particularly on the rise, do you think it's now time for you to rethink your stance on a tax on sugary drinks?
Well, as regards the tax itself, it's an interesting idea. The problem for me was to use the income generated to pay for GPs or doctors. If the aim is to ensure that there is a reduction in the number of people who drink sugary drinks, then there is a reduction in the funding available to pay for the additional doctors. What's important is that this problem should be tackled throughout the whole of the UK so that people just don't go and buy pop in England if there's a tax on it in Wales. And it's very important that we continue to educate people about the health problems that can arise as a result of excessive sugar and salt. So the tax as an idea is interesting but not sufficient in itself.
Looking more broadly than just a tax on pop, surely the problem is much wider than that, and the obesogenic food manufacturers who load their products with not just salt, sugar, as well as fat, would you consider tackling all three of those issues and then using the money to subsidise fruit and vegetables? Because that is what has been shown to save lives, far more lives than of people who've killed on the road.
Yeah, I think that I appreciate the members' thoughts on this. I think there are always difficulties in hypothecating a tax in this way. Because if a sin tax is to be used, as they're called, to reduce consumption of a harmful product, and tobacco is one area where that has happened over the years, then the aim is to reduce the number of people consuming that product and therefore to reduce the tax take on that product. So we must be careful not to link the tax take issue with using it, with hypothecating it to pay for a particular issue such as subsidising another product, or indeed, as Plaid Cymru would have it, more doctors, because inevitably if you're trying to ensure that people consume less of something, then your tax take will drop. So I take the point that it's important that we use every method imaginable to reduce people's consumption of harmful products. One way is through penalising people, that much is true for the tax system, but important as well, of course, to work together to ensure that people make the right choices in terms of their lifestyle.
We now move to questions of party leaders. And first this afternoon, we have the leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, today the Police Federation have called for the drink-drive limit across England and Wales to be lowered in line with other European countries and Scotland. What is your view?
I agree with that. I think the current limit is too high. I was in Scotland in February and discussing the issue with people there. They accepted that it was a good idea. And we see, of course, in the figures that the number of prosecutions for drink driving in Scotland has dropped.
Thank you, First Minister. The most recent figures available show that in 2012, there were 80 people killed or seriously injured in Wales in crashes related to drink driving. We have about the most lax drink driving limit in the whole of Europe. Northern Ireland is considering dropping that limit, and as you quite rightly said, since the limit was dropped in Scotland, prosecutions for drink driving have dropped by a third since December. Would you agree with me that lowering the drink drive limit here in Wales has the potential to save lives?
Yes, I would. I think that there are a number of ways in which we can continue to improve those figures. Firstly, many people assume that if they drink if they watch what they drink in the evening, then that's fine. But of course, we know a lot of people get breathalyzed the following day, where quite often they've overindulged the evening before and they're still over the limit the following morning. And there's still work to be done, I think, to inform people of the dangers of doing that a night's sleep is not enough to rid the body of alcohol to a level where they will be over the drink-drive limit. And I think it's important to continue to press that message, and reducing the level further is, of course, one way of doing that.
First Minister, last year the Silk Commission recommended that a range of road safety measures were devolved to Wales, including the drink-drive limit and speed limits. It seems to me that there is potential for speed limits to be devolved to Wales, but not drink driving. Would you agree to put pressure on the UK government to lower the drink-drive limit across England and Wales, and if they're not prepared to do so, to allow for the devolution of drink-drive limits so that this legislature could have its say?
Yes, I think this is an issue that should be devolved. I think the issue of speed limits should be devolved. I think there are issues in terms of road signs going to be devolved to Scotland. In Wales, with its bilingual road signs, Wales is a prime candidate for seeing how we can design road signs better. So I would agree with her. I think it's important that that element of devolution is offered to Wales. I think we could indeed reduce the drink-drive limit in Wales, and I'm sure that I suspect there'll be a majority in this chamber to do just that. If, however, the UK government refuse to devolve that, then yes, of course, I would be urging the UK government, as it legislates for England and Wales, to reduce the drink-drive limit.
We now move to Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'd like to ask you about the role of advisers within the Welsh Government. And on the 23rd of February, Mr David Goldstone wrote to the management of Eidboda, senior Welsh Government officials, confirming that he had advised to the Economy Minister to withdraw an agreed offer of financial support to their business. Last week, in a written answer, you confirmed that Mr Goldstone was contracted to give advice to the Welsh Government on property-related matters only. First Minister, would you like to explain how a property consultant came to be involved in the detail of this particular application?
He was not acting on behalf of the Welsh Government.
Well, I have to say I've got an email in front of me, First Minister, that shows that Mr Goldstone on 5 separate occasions passed comment and advice to your government in relation to this particular company. And I'll quote the email if I may. And this is the email. I have now spoken at length with the Minister, and it is clear to me that this is not currently a project for support by Welsh Government. It goes on to say, this is more appropriate for something akin to an enterprise fund of private investors. I am merely an advisor, and this is not at this point in time the considered opinion of the Welsh Government, but it is merely the advice that I have given. This sounds like professional advice to me, First Minister. First Minister, do you accept that Mr Goldstone went beyond his terms of reference from your government?
Well, first of all, he is a property advisor to officials, not to the Minister. And secondly, of course, the Minister did make an offer to the company involved. So even if it is suggested that the advice influenced the Minister's decision was quite the opposite. And she did indeed make an offer to the company itself.
Yes, but First Minister, you have told me quite specifically that Mr Goldstone's role is in property matters, not this type of business application, business loan, business support. It is quite shocking that it has taken the collapse of this project, which could have potentially brought 100 jobs, to actually find out what Mr Goldstone's role is within the government. It is clear that his role extends far beyond property advice. And in fact, he actually gives out business cards stating that he has a role within the business department, but also in the health department as well. Do you not think that this is inappropriate, given that no one really understands what Mr Goldstone's role is, not even your good self, by pointing out that he deals in property, and yet I've given you evidence here where he's advising on applications for funding from the Welsh Government?
Well, let me make it clear. David Goldstone advises officials on property matters in EST and advises officials on property matters within the Health and Social Services Department. That is the basis upon which he provides that advice. He does not provide advice in terms of whether to invest or not in any particular company. And bear in mind that the suggestion is, and I accept what he has just said, that advice was purported to be given to the Minister. Nevertheless, the Minister actually did make an offer. So any suggestion that somehow this influenced the Minister not to make an offer of funding is clearly wrong.
The Leader of Plaid Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch, Llywyd. First Minister, you said during the UK election campaign that the Welsh NHS needed 1,000 extra staff members, and you said that this policy would be funded by a UK-wide mansion tax. Now, there's not going to be a UK-wide mansion tax, so will the Welsh NHS now get the additional 1,000 staff that you say it needs?
Well, we said we would look to train an extra 1,000 staff, and that is something we would still like to do. But of course, the source of funding has gone. It's a source of funding that was actually sustainable as well. Sadly, we saw the view of the electors last week. Now, it is said that £8 billion will be made available for the Department of Health in England. We can expect a consequential from that. I hope that is a clean consequential. In other words, it is not a consequential that is cut in other ways through cuts in funding to the block grant.
First Minister, today the Royal College of GPs have said that we are nearing a crisis in terms of GP practice in Wales. And they say that many people are waiting for more than a week for an appointment. And I know that there are many other people who are waiting for far longer. Now, the Royal College tell us that 23% of GPs are due to retire. And what they want to know, First Minister, and what patients will want to know, is do you have a plan B for doctor recruitment and training?
Yes, we do. I think the nature of general practice is changing. We have to understand that the vast majority of general practice is delivered by people who are in effect private contractors, as GPs are. I think that model carries less appeal now for many young doctors. I think they are looking to be able to move around. They don't want to be in one place all the time. And I suspect we will see more of a move over the years to salaried GPs, so there is that flexibility. I think that's in the interests of Wales, actually, because that will mean that people will go and work in certain communities, offer their expertise for a certain number of years, and move on. One of the difficulties is, of course, that in some parts of Wales it's been difficult to recruit GPs because GPs don't want to be tied down in that way. And we have to look at the way in which GP services are delivered in the future to make sure that that flexibility leads to an increase in the number of GPs who are available to deliver the service.
Well, that doesn't sound at all like a concrete plan to me, First Minister. I'll remind you of what you said recently. You said that we know that people in Wales cherish their NHS and want to see a safe, modern and sustainable service guaranteed for the future. We need more trained healthcare professionals to make that happen. They are your words. You don't accept, though, do you, that we are near a crisis point on this? So with people waiting for over a week for a GP, and in some cases even longer, with a quarter of GPs nearing retirement, are you seriously saying that this is as good as it gets for Welsh patients?
Well, she clearly didn't listen to the answer I gave. Firstly, we've said all along there's a need to examine carefully the way in which GP services are delivered. The old model of the contractor model is becoming progressively less attractive for new people. And as a result of that, it's important that we move to a situation where we support GPs who are salaried. That will mean, because of the greater flexibility, that GPs are more able to move around, and that will make all parts of Wales more attractive to them. Now, she talks about a plan. I don't know what her plan claims to be. I mean, we talk about recruiting 1,000 doctors, as she has said, from an ever-diminishing pot of money, but it does take 10 years to train a GP. And so the first thing to do is to ensure, well, I mean, the first thing to do, I know it's, the first thing to do is to ensure that we have in place an attractive NHS that GPs want to work in, and that's the first stage. We have done that in terms of ensuring that we work with the GPs. We have more GPs than ever in Wales. That is correct. We have more nurses than ever in Wales. And, of course, it's correct to say that in some parts of Wales there are still recruitment problems. But that is what we want to do, to work with GPs, to look at the model of delivery, to improve the model of delivery, to make it more flexible and therefore more attractive. That is our vision for Wales. It is not a pale imitation of Scotland.
We now move on to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Simon Thomas.
Pass. What assessment has the First Minister made of the impact of the UK's possible exit from the European Union on the Welsh economy?
The economic losses to Wales, if the United Kingdom were to leave the European Union, are potentially very large. In addition to the likely fiscal impact, the wider economic effects that would arise if Welsh access to European markets were inhibited could be very significant.
Thank you, First Minister. I agree with your interpretation, and the MEP Jill Evans has estimated that membership of the EU is worth £40 per capita for everyone in Wales through the direct support we receive as well as the additional economic benefits. Would you therefore welcome any campaign that Wales should remain a part of the European Union being established here in Wales on a multi-party basis, and those who are of no party at all, with eminent business people among those who would lead such a campaign?
I would support that most definitely. What we must avoid, of course, is any scheme where a referendum on membership of the European Union is held on the same day as Assembly elections and Scottish Parliament elections and Northern Ireland Assembly elections. The people of Wales deserve to have a clear run. I know that there was an election for commissioners in the past, but I would be against any kind of plan that would entail simultaneous elections. But no, I agree completely. We will have to have a campaign established in order to demonstrate the benefit to the people of Wales of being members of the European Union, and to show that we get more funding out than we pay in.
David Rees.
And First Minister, as we know, the EU market is important to our exports for the manufacturing industries here in Wales, particularly our anchoring industries such as Tata Steel. And therefore, as well as the generic approach to EU referendum issues, what discussions is the Welsh Government going to have with the sector, such as manufacturing, to ensure that we put a united face to keep in Europe and keep the exports operational?
Well, I know what their private views are, and I'm keen to ensure that those views are made public. When I speak to potential investors from abroad, what is absolutely crucial to them is free access to the European market. That's the big market. If we lose access to that market, we automatically become far less attractive as a place to invest in, far less attractive as a place to attract investment on the basis of a European base for a particular manufacturer being created in Wales. I mean, commercially and economically, it would be a disaster.
Russell George.
First Minister, following the election result, the Prime Minister has a mandate from the British people to seek reform in Europe, which he will then put to the British people. Now, later this month, the Prime Minister is expected to present UK priorities for EU reform. Now, do you believe that any reform is necessary? And if so, what reforms would you like to see to enable the Welsh Government to act with more flexibility in supporting the Welsh economy, particularly in areas such as my own constituency, which fall outside the scope of Objective 1 funding?
There is no doubt there's need for reform. Nobody can argue that the current structure is perfect, far from it. The UK is far from perfect, and I would argue that we don't ditch the UK, we reform it in the same way with the European Union. We reform it rather than ditch it. Well, let's see what the Prime Minister can get. I think the first thing he has to do is to build bridges with other countries that are less keen on fast integration, and so far that's not been done. There are other countries out there who want to slow down in terms of integration. It's important the UK builds bridges with them. We would, of course, want to see as much flexibility as possible in terms of what the Welsh Government can do, but transferring responsibility and powers from Brussels to London is of no use at all to Wales. What's important is if there are to be any kind of transfers of powers, they actually come to the people of Wales and not to Whitehall.
William Powell.
Well, First Minister, I was very encouraged by your response earlier to Simon Thomas's question with regard to the need for a cross-party and indeed non-party campaign to engage the people of Wales in the debate around our membership of the European Union. What thoughts have you had about the potential implications of new legislation on political campaigning in the UK that could potentially have a bearing on bringing together such a coalition of business, trade unions, farming unions and so on? And what can the Welsh Government do to promote a genuine grassroots campaign of the kind you describe?
You raise a very good point. It's not one I considered fully in terms of what the new rules would mean for a campaign of this kind. But I'm sure that once the date of the referendum is announced, then we'll start on bringing together a cross-party campaign. I mean, on this issue, it's right to say that there will be members of the Conservative Party who will take different views on this. Probably those in the Labour Party across the UK who will take slightly different views on this as well, but I've no doubt that the general consensus, of course, would be to make sure that we promote the advantages of being part of the big market and promote the advantages, particularly to our farmers, of the subsidies that they get. There's no doubt in my mind, our farmers get more than £200 million a year in European subsidies. There is no doubt in my mind that there is no way that money will be made up by the UK government if those subsidies went. I have dealt with DEFRA and its predecessor MAF for many, many years under different parties. And one thing I can tell you is there is no respect for hill farming. It's all big arable, big dairy. And I would fear hugely for Welsh farming if any kind of control over subsidies were given to Whitehall. They do not recognise the social, economic and environmental importance of hill farming in Wales and elsewhere.
Question 4, John Griffiths.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's strategy for economic development in South East Wales?
Well, we're progressing with a range of priorities to encourage economic development across the South East and further afield. They include, of course, the provision of business support through Business Wales, through ICT support and transport infrastructure improvements.
First Minister, Newport City Council, Cardiff City Council and Bristol City Council are working to collaborate on economic development, transport and energy issues for collective benefit. Will you agree that this Western Cities initiative is very promising, can sit alongside the South East Wales City region, and will you set out what action Welsh Government can take to support this development?
Yes, it can. I mean, it's important for us to remember that we look to cooperate cross-border as well. We've done it with the Mersey Alliance, for example. And it's pretty common elsewhere in Europe for that to happen. We shouldn't think that economic boundaries are somehow wholly in sync with political boundaries. Clearly, they're not just between Wales and England, but across the whole of Europe, for that matter. So, yes, we'd encourage Cardiff and Newport to work with Bristol to take forward matters of mutual interest. And I see no conflict with what they are doing in terms of raising the profile of their collective cities with the work being done by the capital city region.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. First Minister, in March this year, the Abovale Enterprise Zone Strategic Plan said that in the quote is, progress has been made with site preparation work across the zone to bring each of the 5 key sites to an investment ready stage, quote close. Will the First Minister advise when these preparation works are due to be completed so that Abovale Enterprise Zone can be to reach its full potential of bringing jobs and investment to South Wales East, please?
I think the member mentioned Ebbw Vale. I can say to him that as far as Ebbw Vale is concerned, progress has been made with site preparation works, the installation of highways and site-specific information signage to assist with marketing the zone has been taken forward. Of course, the development of the new Heads of the Valleys dual carriageway does provide direct access to the zone. That's a £40 million investment, and of course, looking to develop the extension of the railway line from the current Ebbw Vale Parkway station to the work site at Ebbw Vale, providing then, of course, direct rail access to the zone. In addition as well, of course, significant amounts of marketing material have been produced in order to pursue potential business inquiries on top of those that have already been received.
Lindsay Whittle.
Well, First Minister, Newport Docks is clearly a very important player in the South East Wales economy. On the 5th of May, you said in this chamber regarding the M4 Relief Road that your officials will be looking into increasing the height of a bridge potentially to be built through the middle of Newport Docks. Was it an off-the-cuff remark or have cost analysis been carried out? In which case, would you confirm whether this would increase the already enormous price tag of £1 billion for the Black Route, thus sucking even more money from other vital projects such as the South East Wales metro system?
Well, first of all, the metro system and the M4 are not in competition with the same funds. I remind the member that what the UK government has said is that early drawdown of borrowing powers is linked specifically to the M4 Relief Road. So we can't use the money for anything else at this stage. Now, in terms of discussions with the port, we want to make sure that the bridge is of sufficient height so as not to interfere with the workings of the port, and I'm confident that agreement can be reached in terms of what the height of that bridge should be. I must be right then.
Elena Parrott.
Josh Lewis. First Minister, I'm sure you'd agree that a city deal for Cardiff could transform the economic future of South Wales and beyond. But reports in the press today suggest that the absolute chaos that's surrounding the leadership of Cardiff Council means that even their own members are now briefing the press that they don't believe this administration can deliver it. Now, clearly, if the UK government is going to devolve maybe up to £1 billion of funding and powers to an entity, they need to know that it is a stable one. What is your government doing to ensure that there are government structures in existence that will enable all of the local authorities in the capital city region to collaborate effectively and deliver a city region for the whole of South East Wales?
Well, first of all, the UK government can't devolve powers to it because those powers are already devolved to here. So it would mean that we would have to look at powers, not the UK government. I understand a meeting took place at the beginning of this month with all the relevant local authorities where there was support in principle to move ahead with the city deal. We don't know yet how much money would be on the table for Cardiff and the surrounding area. We wait to see what the Treasury say about that, and we will look to work, of course, with Cardiff Council and other councils in order to maximise the financial benefit to Wales.
Question 5, William Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What assessment has the First Minister made of how the transatlantic trade and investment partnership will affect Wales?
We take a close interest given the significance of trade to the Welsh economy and the potential wider implications of the negotiations on public services.
Thank you for your answer, First Minister. You will know that the trade between the European Union and the United States is the greatest bilateral trade agreement in the world, and this will further help to make sure that the anomalies are removed. It can only really offer good and better trade relations for Wales, particularly as, of course, the utilities reservation was made between the Council of Ministers and the European Union.
I believe that there are opportunities for the Welsh economy if trade barriers are removed, particularly those of the US. I mean, I remember when I was Rural Affairs Minister, particularly high barriers in terms of food and drink, both ways, actually. I think seeing them removed, particularly with regard to the exports of Welsh meat, would be enormously helpful to our farmers. That said, of course, I've said it before, and it's important that I restate this point, that I would not give my agreement to any new arrangement that forced governments to privatise services or prevented governments to take services back into public hands if they had been privatised in the past. Now, I've received assurances in that regard from the UK government, but it is absolutely crucial that nothing is done with the ability of the Welsh government to arrange public services as it sees fit and organised, of course, by those elected by the people of Wales.
Simon Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I just agree with what the First Minister has just set out? Because it is important, though we lower trade barriers, we don't see that as an opening for the privatisation of our public services. And that's a decision, if it ever is taken by the people that elect us here or the people that elect the UK government. He mentioned his earlier discussions with the UK government. Of course, we have a new government now and a new set of priorities in Europe as well, and a new set of negotiations that will take in place. Have you had an opportunity already, First Minister, to raise this issue with that new government, or will you do so as part of the discussions now regarding our ongoing membership of the European Union?
Not yet, but the ministers who were involved in the previous correspondence that we had were all of the party who are still in government. So I wouldn't expect that position to have changed. If it has, it's for them to explain how it has changed. Now, what we don't know, of course, is what exactly the Prime Minister will be negotiating on with regard to our membership of the European Union. There are some matters that have been made public. We don't know where those negotiations will go. Regardless of the outcome of those negotiations, it's still important, of course, that Wales remains part of the big market that is the European Union.
Question 6, Mike Hedges.
Will the First Minister make a statement on cooperative housing?
Yes, a cooperative housing approach for Wales is embedded in our programme for government. We provided practical and financial support to emerging projects, the first of which will be completed this summer. We've also improved the tenancy environment for fully mutual housing organisations in the housing world.
Okay, thank you, First Minister, for that response, and congratulate you on the progress being made. But it is true that we're far further back than Europe, most of Europe, and certainly North America in the development of cooperative housing, and that's not just Wales, that's the whole of Great Britain. So what further can be done to promote this as the third housing option?
The member is right to say that we are historically behind Europe and indeed North America, where there is a richer and older tradition of cooperative housing. But we do have plans in place to promote cooperative housing further, building on the measures we've put in place in the Housing Wales Act, and that housing is being developed. The cooperatives themselves will need to promote the alternative route to housing. It's already happening with the group of cooperatives in Cardiff, looking at a second development due to the interest and demand. It's also worth pointing out that any new fully mutual housing association would fall under our regulatory responsibility and would need to be a registered social landlord to receive the social housing grant direct.
Mark Isherwood.
Clearly enabling local communities to make decisions about their own homes can make a positive difference, but cooperative housing is not necessarily affordable housing. How will you ensure that funding isn't diverted from social housing grant that could deliver more social and affordable homes in order to deliver these schemes, so it's priority on supply, and ensure that we don't end up, as Sweden has, after a number of decades, with this becoming housing for the better off?
Well, I mean, there's no suggestion that we are looking to divert money away from housing. We are on target in terms of the houses, the social housing that we wish to build, and we are beginning to fill a gap that opened up in the 1980s. One thing we will not do is to reduce the amount of social housing available through selling off the stock.
Al Roberts.
Prif Weinidog,
First Minister, the Social Services Act also calls on local authorities to develop fully mutual cooperative models. What steps are you taking with those councils to provide a cooperative provision in this field?
Well, we have provided revenue funding for the Cooperative Centre, the Wales Cooperative Centre, in order to ensure that there is support available for cooperative groups. It's available to anyone who wants to apply for it in order for them to use the expertise that the centre has should they want to proceed with a cooperative approach to resolving housing problems in their own areas. So there is support available, and I would hope that groups would consider that support and make use of it.
Question 7, Jenny Rathbone.
Neil Clywyd. How is the Welsh Government planning to use European structural and investment funds to drive up productivity across Wales?
We are investing vital EU funds in key areas to drive up economic growth and jobs, including, of course, business competitiveness and finance, research and innovation, particularly with regard to productivity, skills and attainment levels. We know that the key to improving productivity is through continually improving people's skills.
We obviously know that this is a key matter when we're hoping to dig ourselves out of qualifying for convergence funding. So I'm fully aware that the government is taking this matter very seriously. One of the issues, as you say, is to help close the productivity gap, is to improve our skills base. Well, on a recent visit to Wilder, I talked to people who are likely to have to seek new career pathways. And one of the issues that they identified was the difficulty in finding the right courses for them in North Wales, and in particular in relation to project management. They were having to go to either Liverpool, Manchester or Cardiff to get the skills as certified by the Association of Project Management. And given that they have a monopoly over this qualification, what can be done to ensure that those skills are able to be developed, across Wales, and not just having to travel outside the area, where obviously the financial barriers are considerable?
If I could deal with the issue of productivity first, I saw the comments yesterday by Lord Bamford at JCB talking about his views on the EU. I saw those, but what concerned me was the comment that he made was that at the moment the construction sector is where the growth is. If that's the case, we're headed towards another housing bubble. And that is a worrying thing, because we're not seeing productivity increases in manufacturing, which is where we need to see them. Why is it that a worker in America or Germany is more productive than a worker in Britain with the same machine? Reason? Skills. And a lack of investment in skills over many, many years, and an investment that we are looking to put right. But in terms of the specific issue that she actually raised, it's an opportunity for the North Wales Economic Ambition Board, of course, to examine the skills that are needed regionally in the north. It's an opportunity for genuine cross-border collaboration on skills and employment issues. It's for them, of course, to examine how those skills can be made available. So that it's not just work that we would, of course, the prison, the Wrexham prison, so those project management skills are made available in Wales. It's an area I'm sure that they will wish to focus on.
Nick Ramsey.
First Minister, as well as calling for EU funding ambassadors, the Enterprise and Business Committee report on EU funding opportunities also called on Welsh Government departments to better champion engagement within their remit. Has this engagement improved since that report? And if not, how can we have any confidence that the next round of EU funding will deliver any more sustainable growth than the last, which your predecessor, Rodri Morgan, told us could have been far better spent?
Well, one of the issues that we, of course, as government have to wrestle with is how is the money best spent? Do you spend it mainly on smaller projects, or do you look at a smaller number of larger projects that may have a greater impact? And these are issues that we continue to consider in terms of how we consider how European spending is best utilised for the benefit of the people of Wales.
Alan Fred Jones.
How does GDP level in Wales compare with the GDP levels across the UK?
Well, as regards GDP in Wales, we're more or less in the same place, but we are behind Germany, behind North America, and behind the competitors. And that is what's most important, is to ensure that the level of skills increases so that we can compete better in the future. There is no other way of explaining it, because if you get the same situation, the same machinery, well, Germany's doing better and North America's doing better. Skills is everything. And that's why it's extremely important that we continue to invest in skills to come up to the same level as Germany and Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the allocation of transport grants to local government?
Yes, the Minister wrote to members on the 14th of May announcing a total of just under £27 million in transport grants to local authorities across Wales.
Thank you, First Minister. And the nature of my question is a little different to what it was to be when I first tabled the question, because it was some half an hour later that we heard the announcement from the Minister, and I would like to pass on the appreciation on Anglesey that the grants available will enable important investments on the island, but questions remain in terms of the timing. The application period was very close to the end of the previous financial year. The window was quite small, and as a result, the statement didn't come until mid-May, whilst Ynys Môn is eager to proceed with projects as soon as possible. What assurances can the First Minister give that officials can look at making that announcement a little earlier in the year?
Well, when I saw the member's question, I attempted to think what kind of criticism he may have. But of course, we've seen what's happened on Anglesey and how many projects have been funded. Of course, that is a matter for the Council if they're ready to proceed, and we are eager to collaborate with them to make sure that the applications are processed as soon as possible.
Accepted an urgent question, understanding what a